He was one of the greatest pharaohs ancient Egypt had ever seen. The greatest builder, the most fearless fighter, and the father of more than 100 children. New evidence now suggests that he was also the unnamed pharaoh of the biblical Exodus. He was Ramses the Great. Is this the pharaoh who went head-to-head with the God of Israel? Is this the only face from the Bible that we may ever see? Ramses' monuments stretch from his colossal statues at Memphis in the north to the temple of Abu Simbel in the south. In between, the Nile Valley is dotted with temples, palaces, and statues built by the pharaoh the world would know as Ramses the Great. Ramses waged the greatest battle any pharaoh ever fought. Outnumbered, in hostile territory, he fought his way out when those around him were ready to run. Ramses knew how to fight. The only battle he may ever have lost was with the God of the Israelites. If you want to understand Ramses, you have to go to Abydos, the most sacred place in all of Egypt. For thousands of years, pilgrims brought offerings here to gain favor with Osiris, the god of the dead. Today, all that remains of the offerings is the Hill of Pots, jars, now broken, carried by the pilgrims. Ramses' grandfather was the first pharaoh of his dynasty. They were a military family, new to the royalty business. So when Ramses' father, Seti, wanted to show that they were part of the establishment, he built a temple on the sacred ground at Abydos. He assembled the finest craftsmen in the land to give the people this dazzling display that once again, Egypt was great. Seti wasn't just building a temple. He was making a political statement. You can expect great things from my reign. This was Ramses' father. It was a family of overachievers, and Ramses intended to do even better. And he did. When he became pharaoh, Ramses built a temple so awesome that it would become his logo forever and an icon for all of Egypt. Ramses was only in his 20s when he began to build Abu Simbel. It's in Nubia, past ancient Egypt's southern border. It was a unique project. Most temples were built from blocks of stone, fitted together, and then carved. Abu Simbel was sculpted out of a mountain. New rock-cutting techniques had to be developed. Artists were lowered from the top of the mountain on scaffolds to paint an enormous grid that served as a guide for the sculptors, who then carved the 4 67-foot statues of Ramses seated on his throne. But why build such an incredible monument in such a remote place? There was never a large Egyptian population there that could worship at the temple. It was pure propaganda. Ramses wanted everyone to be afraid of him. Nubia was Egypt's source of gold, and the temple was an awesome reminder to Nubians of Ramses' power. Anyone entering Egypt from Nubia would have to sail past the temple with its 4 colossal statues of Ramses staring down. But then, if a Nubian stopped to visit the temple, he was met right at the entrance with impressive carvings of bound captives, many of them Nubians. Once inside, the visitor could see Ramses leading the army in battle, the reins of his chariot tied around his waist, shooting arrows at the enemy. It was great drama, but it didn't end there. Back in the innermost part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, there are seated statues of the gods Amun-Re, Ptah, and Re-Harakhti. With them, exactly the same size, is Ramses the Great, a god among the gods. Quite an ego, huh? And Ramses didn't stop with just one temple at Abu Simbel. He built a second one for his beloved queen, Nefertari. They were married as teenagers, and he clearly adored her. Above the entrance to her temple, he had an inscription carved, calling her, "She for whom the sun doth shine." Nice, isn't it? In the 1920s, when America wanted to commemorate its great presidents, Ramses at Abu Simbel was the inspiration for Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Even with modern tools and engineering techniques, it took 20 years to complete the 4 colossal heads of the presidents. Just about as long as it did to finish Abu Simbel. Ramses began his reign with a flurry of activity. Egypt is a vast country, mostly desert, and it's the Nile that makes the land habitable. In ancient times, the Egyptians clustered along the banks of the river. Wherever there was a city, it was on the Nile. At Thebes, ancient Egypt's religious center, Ramses built more great temples. And across the Nile, on the west bank, he had tombs constructed in the Valley of the Kings and Queens. But the real capital had always been at Memphis, some 400 miles further north, near modern Cairo. This is where the business of running the country took place. When Ramses came to power, he moved the capital to an area called the Delta, about 100 miles north of Memphis. Here, the Nile branches out into tributaries, and the entire land becomes lush and green. But Ramses didn't move the capital because of the climate. You see, he was a military man, and it was a military reason that led him to build his city named Ramesses in the north. It was the ideal place to launch military strikes, north to Syria and west to Libya, Egypt's traditional enemies. So he built an entire new city and dreamed of the hordes of treasure he could bring back to Egypt. This may be the city that the Bible says the Pharaoh forced the Israelites to build. Ramses' new city became a bustling complex of palaces, temples, storehouses, workshops, and barracks. Ramses had grown up an army brat, and he was comfortable around a military post. It was from this new city that he would lead his legions to the victories that would make him Ramses the Great. By the time he was 25, Ramses was the leader of the largest professional army the ancient world had ever seen. Pretty impressive, isn't it? The army was made up of infantry and charioteers. The infantry numbered more than 20,000. Their weapons were the battle axe, spear, and sickle sword. Because maneuverability was the name of the game in chariot warfare, chariots had to be light, so they broke easily, and only a few have survived. took Nadia Lokma, Egypt's master wood conservator, years to restore this chariot, carefully bending the pieces to their original shapes. The chariot was made of different kinds of wood. Elm for the wheels, because it bends easily, and ash for the body, because of its strength. Each chariot was pulled by 2 horses and carried 2 men, a driver and an archer. The floor was made of woven leather thongs, covered with a leather flap. It acted as a shock absorber and provided a relatively stable platform from which the archer could shoot his arrows. It was like a sports car, a light body with a lot of engine. Ramses' reputation as a fearless warrior was established at the Battle of Kadesh. We have more accounts of this battle than any other event in ancient history. It was ancient Egypt's equivalent of George Washington crossing the Delaware. What's great is that we don't just have the written accounts of the battle. We still have the very field on which Ramses fought. The ancient fortified city of Kadesh in Syria was built on a hill. This site has been inhabited for more than 3,000 years, and today a modern village is still on top of it. But soon it may be deserted. Salt in the soil and water has caused most of the inhabitants to abandon their houses. Now, only a few villagers live at what was once a strategic site of the ancient Middle East. You see, Kadesh was crucial for Ramses' plan to control the Middle East. But the city was controlled by Hittites, warriors from what is now modern Turkey. They were Egypt's #1 enemy, and Ramses intended to take Kadesh from them. So in the 2nd month of summer, in the 5th year of his reign, 20,000 soldiers followed Ramses out of Egypt. They planned to capture Kadesh and all the territory around it. The soldiers were divided into 4 divisions of 5,000, each division named after a god of Egypt: Amun, Re, Ptah, and Set. As Ramses